Give a warm round of applause. Hello. Howdy. So my name is Nicole Pritchett, and I grew up here in Key Biscayne, and I am a filmmaker. Most recently, I was the showrunner for John Leguizamo's new 3-part TV series that comes out this year. I did a film called Unprecedented, where we followed around President Trump and his family during the last election, which was very exciting. I work with, and I collaborate with Raconteur and Billy Corben's company, who is my favorite documentary director that we're going to bring up here in a second. But I wanted to thank Maite and everyone, and Claire and Ed and Mary and everyone for putting this on and making this possible in Key Biscayne. Growing up, I never thought film was something, it never crossed my mind as something I could do because I really didn't have much exposure to it. So thank you guys for bringing this here. And without further ado, I'll introduce Billy Corben. So some of you may know Billy's work, but he has done maybe 9 feature documentaries or more.
I don't know what the number is, though.
He has the Cocaine Cowboys franchise.
That's 5 right there.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I counted that as 1, I think.
Just because it's the same thing over and over and over again?
No!
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. What I say, we're not one-hit wonders, but we may be one-trick ponies.
No.
The jury is still out on that.
They were the youngest filmmakers invited to Sundance for their
That's right.
first
Shout out to
documentary.
Sasha, the youngest filmmaker invited to Key Biscayne
Woo!
Film Festival. Yeah. This is what happened, Sasha. We're like the before and after picture here, you know. We were the youngest filmmakers in the history of the Sundance Film Festival at the time that we were invited, which was 2001.
And also very connected to Key Biscayne. I mean, if you've seen God Forbid, it's on Hulu. It's the most watched documentary they've ever had, and we filmed a big part of it here in Key Biscayne.
That's true. That's the Easter egg. Is that so? Our most recent and as you said, the most watched doc in Hulu history. God Forbid, the sex scandal that brought down a dynasty, which is about the. How old is this audience?
I think it's just
Sasha. Hold your ears. It is about the cuckold threesome between a former pool boy at the Fontainebleau Hotel and Jerry Falwell Jr. and his wife Becky, who were at the time the president and first lady of Liberty, the largest Christian university in the world. And they met at the Fontainebleau Hotel while Giancarlo Granda was working there, and we got exclusive access to him to interview for 3, 4, 5 days. And that master interview, that hero interview with Giancarlo Granda that makes up probably 40 minutes of the runtime of this 100-some-odd minute documentary was shot right here in Key Biscayne. So that background that you see, he's in a beautiful house overlooking kind of a lagoon or an inlet here on the Key, and that was right on the island here.
Yeah, I think so many people think when you make films, you have to leave Miami to do that, and I love that you guys bet on Miami over and over again in all your filmmaking, all your stories. Why do you tell Miami stories or Florida stories?
Well, first, we're from here. Everyone at the company is a Florida native. Alfred Spellman, my producing partner, was born in Miami Beach at Mount Sinai and has really never left the barrier island except when we have to go to the airport for the most part. Still lives there now with his family. And so when we went to Sundance in 2001, our film Raw Deal: A Question of Consent was the first movie to sell out all of its screenings in advance of the festival. It wound up on the front page of the New York Post, of all things, and it was very controversial and very high profile. And Alfred and I wound up doing about 50 or 60 interviews in 5 or 6 days. And the last question of all of them was always the same. It was, now that you've arrived, you've been anointed belles of the Sundance Ball, which is a real quote, what are you going to do now? You're going to move to New York or L.A.? And as obvious as it was to them that we would do that, it was just as obvious to us that we would come home to Miami. First, because home is where you go when you're done with other shit. That's why they call it home. And second, we didn't want to be 3 more schmucks peddling our wares in New York or L.A. We wanted to be 3 schmucks in Miami peddling our wares. But it was really that we wanted we wanted a brand. We wanted to be known as something, and the way that like Spike Lee or Martin Scorsese are like New York storytellers, the way that Barry Levinson and David Simon are Baltimore storytellers, the way that Rick Linklater and is a Austin storyteller. We just wanted to be associated with so that people would know, oh, those are the Miami guys. So we thought that Miami was an incredible untapped resource of characters and stories in the nonfiction realm. There's a lot of great fiction written about Florida fuckery, which is our genre, but not a lot of nonfiction films. So we came back to do our calling card documentary about our childhoods growing up in Miami in the 1980s, which was originally called City Made of Snow. And then, it's not a bad title, but then we decided that we wanted to eat that year. And so we changed the title to Cocaine Cowboys. And the rest is history, because then we became the Miami guys, and then it was Cocaine Cowboys that we were able to sell a documentary to ESPN Films about the championship history of the University of Miami Hurricanes, which was called Hurricane Season, actually, when we pitched it, and later became the U for 30 for 30.
Even, God forbid, the title that it is, I remember when Hulu was changing that title in the beginning. They've changed all the titles, right? You've changed them all, kind of.
Some for better and some for worse, I would say. The God forbid was originally called The Pool Boy.
Billy didn't want to change it, but I liked God forbid. I liked the change.
Yeah, that's fine.
But you talk about, I want to play, if we can, just one trailer of one of Billy's films, because it was shot here in Key Biscayne. A bit of it was shot here. Could we play that? It's going to be on the side screens.
There's a saying, never meet your heroes because they'll break your heart. From the moment I remember, I wanted to be a baseball player. It was the American dream. I got kicked off the team for smoking weed. It was a disaster. My plan was go into medicine.
The Belize School of Medical and Performing Arts.
What is Florida about? It's about vanity and sex. It was a perfect place for the anti-aging movement.
Especially down here in Miami, everyone wants things now.
There's almost no regulations.
You'd have people who pretended to be doctors, giving all types of medical advice.
He had a white lab coat that said Dr. Tony Bosch. He had a stethoscope around his neck. Yeah, I assumed he was a doctor.
Manny was the first VIP client. Within weeks, his focus was much better. He felt a lot quicker. This guy says, yeah, my cousin is in the Yankees. It was an A-Rod. He says, I want whatever Manny was taking. I had a true believer right away. 7 days after he started my program, he went ahead and in one game, he hit 3 home runs. And he said, I'll give you an extra $150,000 a year if you give me an exclusivity. I said, for 200, you got a deal. Listen, each home run costs money. At this time, Biogenesis had close to 300 athletes. We were consuming so much product, I had to go to the black market.
Okay, I just stumbled across some kind of steroid ring.
I didn't think I was gonna get caught. I was busy going to parties. My cocaine bill was $6,000 a month.
The biggest steroid scandal in sports history exploded over $4,000.
Yes, look, if I don't get my money, I'll blow this whole thing up.
It was just an absolute clown show.
Get rid of steroids now. This is my whole life, my legacy. You tell me why I should serve one inning.
Tony Bosch is not a doctor. Tony Bosch is a drug dealer.
Coke addict, bad son, bad father, bad brother, bad everything.
What can you tell us about that? No comment. He's lucky he's not in the canal anywhere.
This guy's connected. A lot of people involved. Don't do this, you're gonna get killed. So I got my 9mm.
For every sleazy thing Major League Baseball did in trying to pay witnesses, threatening people to cooperate, A-Rod and his crew were doing almost the exact same thing.
You pretty much can forget the Hall of Fame.
It was almost like, hey, Mom, I made it to the big leagues, but in a different way, You can't make this up.
So first off, a couple questions. You have kids starring in this film. How did you decide to do that? Where did you guys film in the Key? What was the process like?
What kids? Oh, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, this is an interesting kind of long story. So we did reenactments in the documentary, and all of the actors are like 8 years old. But they have facial hair and Yankees pinstripes and police uniforms and doctors, lab coats and everything. And we shot all over town on location. Very little studio work. And running around with kids with beards on and, suits and ties and police uniforms. And what was funny is nobody looked at us twice anywhere we went and were filming. That just seemed to be perfectly normal on any given day in Miami.
Because Miami.
Yeah. And so the idea was born out of, so we interviewed these two guys, Tony Bosch, the fake doctor, who ran, and he started his anti-aging slash kind of black market steroid business at a cabana at the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne. That was his first doctor's office or anti-aging clinic, was literally at the bar, the tiki bar, on the water, and then he got so big that he needed a cabana and then eventually got a suite and then eventually got a real office right around here somewhere initially, Biogenesis was, before it moved over to US 1 across from the University of Miami, where he started to serve clients like A-Rod. And so the log line for the documentary is that the biggest baseball player in history, the $400 million man, Alex Rodriguez's career ended over a $4,000 debt between a cocaine-addicted fake doctor and his fake tan-addicted steroid patient. And so those are the two guys that you see, the primary guys, is Dr. Tony Bosch and then Porter Fisher. And so I interviewed two of them. They hate each other, obviously. Interviewed them separately. And I realized, listening back to their interviews, they both had very similar storytelling styles in that they were very vivid, very detailed, and very cinematic. It was like interior, Tony's office, night. I walked in and I confronted him and I said, "You asshole, you better give me my money." And he said, I'm Tony Bosch. I don't need to give you any. And they both talked like that, like in dialogue, in like full scenes. And I was like, oh, this is cool, because in sports docs, it's pretty easy. You talk to the sports people, you use the sports footage, and you make a sports doc. There was no sports footage. We maybe show 12 seconds of baseball games, and then everything else is these scenes that take place in fake doctors' offices, in hotel rooms, Live nightclub, the Ritz-Carlton. So we needed to do reenactments. So I thought, well, we could drunk history this, and we could have actors lip-syncing the dialogue. The interview dialogue is delivered by Tony and Porter and these interview subjects. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun? Because it was called Screwball from the jump. We knew the genre, because all of our documentaries, we call them pop docs, our genre. And so we always say, well, what kind of movie are we making? Not we're making a documentary, but Cocaine Cowboys, we wanted to make a gangster movie. We wanted to, how would Martin Scorsese make a documentary? That's how we wanted to do that. So same thing here. It's we want to make a comedy, like a screwball comedy, a total farce. Almost completely burn the sports porn genre that we helped to perpetuate with the U, just burn it down. And so we just have a lot of fun with this, and so I thought the 8-year-olds would be a lot of fun. That idea originates almost 15 years ago. There was an off-Broadway musical called, I need to take a breath, A Very Merry Unauthorized Children's Scientology Pageant. And this play was written by a couple of Yaleys, a very clever, cool, Bowie-esque kind of score. It is performed entirely by elementary school students. Instead of a Christmas pageant about the story of Jesus, it is a Scientology pageant about the story of L. Ron Hubbard. And it's done kind of straight-faced, where, you could just see, Tom Cruise sitting in the front row beaming proudly at Surrey, in this show, and because it was, it was very, almost sincere, kind of like a less crude Book of Mormon, and so, about Scientology. And so I wanted to make a documentary about Scientology and use that musical as a framing device, because Scientology was notoriously litigious, but they never sued this musical. So I thought this would be a cool way in, and hopefully we'd be somewhat shielded from the litigiousness. So needless to say, I could not sell that idea to anybody. And it was a decade at least before Gibney did Going Clear for HBO, and nobody wanted to touch Scientology at that time. So I never got to use that idea, which originated, I think, from a Spike Jonze music video for Biggie back in the 90s called Sky's the Limit. Biggie had just been killed, and he needed to do a music video. And so Spike Jonze said, I'm going to do a music video in the classic Bad Boy Records style, with, cars and suits, Versace, tubs and pools and parties and nightclubs, but I'm going to do it with 8-year-old kids lip-syncing the hip hop lyrics. So I just went back and back and back. But that idea has been kicking around in my head. And so with just the strength of those interviews and some probably Jack Daniels, I was inspired to do that.
Well, I think, you know, having been behind the camera a lot with you, I get to see some of your Rain Man when you get into it. And I think what people don't see on the other side is how you prepare and the questions that you ask. You have a really unique, I think, style of asking questions, getting to the truth, and getting to people to reveal things that I don't think they normally would. And it's like, you know, if everyone knows Jay-Z's work, they drop a beat and he goes into the studio and he doesn't write anything down and he just kind of freestyles on the track and he makes hits. And that's kind of Billy behind the camera. And I don't think people ever get to see that side. So how does your unique kind of questioning come into play? I don't know if you've ever put it into words.
Yeah. Talking about this is like dancing about architecture. It's weird because it's a process. It's not entirely organic. It seems chaotic in the moment, but it's an exceptional amount of research and preparation. But you also don't want to make it seem too rigid for the subject. You want them to feel like they're engaged in an organic conversation, so they'll be candid. The artifice of an interview environment is very stressful. It's very intimidating for untrained media subjects. And immediately, I mean, the definition of documentary is a creative interpretation of reality. So you're trying to capture truth, but you'll never be fully successful at it. So you do the best that you can. Because everything's a creative decision. Whatever appears in the four corners of a frame, whatever you put in, whatever you cut out, that's a subjective decision. So you try to create an environment where people will feel comfortable opening up and talking. And when we talk to people, it's usually about particularly scandalous or embarrassing or traumatic experiences in their life. So it can be very, very difficult. Cathartic if we do it right for them, but very difficult to get them going. And so there's a series of strategies we use. We use an Interrotron or an iDirect, which enables the subject to look directly into the lens of the camera and see a vision of me live on the lens. So they're not looking at a dead dark lens. They're making eye contact with me and thus making eye contact with the audience. So there's more of a connection rather than them looking off camera. And then with the subject, we call our documentaries first person productions. It's all about I and we, not they and she, because you want to hear these stories directly from the horse's mouth. And so we've only got what we get. So I have to get them to say things that they may or may not want to say, things that they may or may not say clearly. We want to stay away from pronouns and actually say, instead of saying she, say Griselda, so that the audience knows who it is you're talking about. And sometimes I'll have to get them to repeat themselves. I'll have to pretend like I didn't hear them, or like I don't understand what they said. And that's playing dumb is a really wonderful tactic. I'm having a brain fart. What's her name? I just said her name. The cocaine.
Zelda?
Yes, I made you say it. So one of the things
This is what he does all interview long with people.
learned-
It's magic being behind the camera.
So what I learned was we were going to prison to visit a hitman, as you do. It was one of Griselda's hitmen. We were in pre-pro and R&D on Cocaine Cowboys, or a city made of snow at that time. And we went in to meet this hitman, and I was scared shitless. This guy was known by veteran homicide detectives who worked murder case after murder case, sometimes 5 or 6 a day at the peak of the Cocaine Cowboys era in Miami in the 80s, who referred to this man as the scariest person they ever encountered in their career. So imagine me and Alfred walking in there to meet this guy. It was terrifying. And so we didn't really, we were trying to convince him to do an interview. That's what we were trying to do. And so we're sitting there, and he's sitting there. They put us in a little office with a desk with a panic button, which was like an old school garage door that went around your wrist, and then it was a little garage door button. And then we were in this office with a desk, with a stapler, with pens and pencils, all sorts of fucking weapons. And and there was a door with one of those like institutional vertical slivers of a window, and they said, we'll come by and check on you every once in a while. Once did I see a soul walk past that door, and they didn't even look inside. Though we'll check on you every once in a while. And then I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm like, my thumb is hovering over this button the entire meeting. You know, my hand is like purple, clutching this thing for dear life. And then I'm thinking, like, this guy was like twice my size. And so I'm thinking, like, oh, this guy's gonna be across the desk. He's gonna smash our heads together. And maybe my twitching dead hand will push this button, you know? But like, I'm like, we're sitting ducks. The guy just sat there for almost 10, 15 minutes like this. But like eyes like, so like these giant, scary, like double, you know, like shotgun eyes, just glaring at Alfred and I. And I didn't say a word, and Alfred was just kind of like, he would like, and so, you know, we wanted to talk about Griselda, like just trying to like kind of stumble our way through this conversation. And then at some point, one of us said, because Albert was just like diarrhea of the mouth. He was just kept like, like waiting for this guy to crack. We were 22 years old, 23 years old, and one of us finally said something about the Lorenzo murders, I think, the double homicide in the Rhodes area, where Rivi and Miguelito and some of Griselda's men came in they were going to murder, well, they were first trying to get the $200,000 for the 4 kilos that they had given them on consignment some weeks earlier. And there were 2 young girls, single digits, and then like a toddler, a son who was like less than 2 years old in like a crib or something. And then so we asked him a question about that. It was like, so that was when Rivi shot the father in the bedroom with the Mac 11, and you were in the living room with the mother tied up with a 9mm. And then he just kind of like, he didn't really relax. He kind of tensed up, but it was like, but his eyes kind of like narrowed, which was, I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. And he was like, kind of shook his head slowly, like, you dumb mother. And then he started to talk because we had said the wrong thing. And so he's thinking, like, these 2 clowns are going to document this history and tell this story, but they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And so I need to set them straight. So that was how I learned. I'm like, oh, if I say the wrong thing, there is nothing that makes someone open up faster than proving how stupid and ignorant you are. So that will get them to open up to me and start to set me straight and tell me the real story. So I will gleefully ask stupid questions or deliberately wrong questions all the time in order to get someone to tell me a story.
And it works every damn time.
Well, not every time, but yeah.
I think
it's not foolproof, but it is idiot-proof. Yeah.
Well, I guess the other thing too is, you know, you talk about the Miami today as being like the world of tomorrow, and
Sorry, world.
And I wanna bring it back to that, right? It's why you continue to make films in Miami, why we continue to open up and look at different stories across the gamut, and how you think filmmaking impacts the world at large, the connection.
Well, Miami is like if Fire Festival was a whole city, you know? So like, this is just like, it's the grift that keeps on grifting. And it is one of it will forever be one of the youngest cities in the country. And so in that way, we are, you know, America's perpetual kind of like belligerent teenager, right? We'll always be an adolescent. And in that regard, we're always about like, you know, there is a lack of institutional memory because of this kind of, tourist-like population that we have, this transient population. And then there's not a lot of places, Key Biscayne being an exception, where people have roots and people have a real connection. Everybody's kind of like, they don't care about the history. It's kind of like, well, just like an adolescent would be just like about the new shit, right? Let's knock this down and let's build something new because no one has a connection to what came before. And so in that way, we feel obligated to preserve and document and share the history of this place. And also because I think we've seen this exacerbated or accelerated by the pandemic. All of the worst trends in Miami, you know, have been accelerated. And as a result, I think we're living in a time where we will live to see there be no Cubans in Little Havana, and no Haitians in Little Haiti, and no Bahamians in Little Bahamas of the West Grove, and no Dominicans in Little Santo Domingo. So like we're seeing a transformation of Miami, and with the people being gone, that is our culture being gone. And then what is Miami but sort of whatever everybody wants it to be, like, so Miami will forever be the mistress and not the bride.
Thank you so
We
much.
gotta go.
All right. Thank you guys so much for
Everyone,
coming.
that was
And
amazing.
for not being outside on this beautiful day.
It really
What do we-
flew by. I'm sure you want to ask questions to Billy, maybe outside. Our next